doing her best to concentrate, to keep her eyes fixed on the screen. But midway into the film, her thoughts begin to wander. Watching Harold Russell, the third male protagonist, along with March and Andrews, the non-professional actor who lost his hands during the war, she begins to think about her great-uncle Stan, the husband of her grandmother's sister Caroline, the one-armed D-Day veteran with the bushy eyebrows, Stan Fitzpatrick, belting back drinks at family parties, telling dirty jokes to her brothers on their grandparents' back porch, one of the many who never managed to pull themselves together after the war, the man with 37 different jobs, old Uncle Stan, dead for a good 10 years now, and the stories her grandmother has told her lately about how he used to knock Caroline around a bit, the now departed Caroline, knocked around so much she lost a couple of teeth one day. And then there are her two grandfathers, both of them alive, one fading and the other lucid, who fought in the Pacific and Europe as young men. Such young men, they were scarcely older than boys. And even though she has tried to get the lucid grandfather to talk to her, Bill Bergstrom, the husband of her one surviving grandmother, he never says much, speaks only in the foggiest generalities. It simply isn't possible for him to talk about those years. They all came home insane, damaged for life. And even the years after the war were still part of the war. The years of bad dreams and night sweats. The years of wanting to punch your fist through walls. So her grandfather humors her by talking about going to college on the GI Bill, about meeting her grandmother on a bus one day and falling in love with her at first sight. Bullshit, bullshit from start to finish. But he is one of those men who can't talk, a card-carrying member from the generation of men who can't talk. And therefore she has to rely on her grandmother for the stories. But she wasn't a soldier during the war. She doesn't know what happened over there. And all she can talk about are her three sisters and their husbands, the dead Caroline and Stan Fitzpatrick and Annabelle, the one whose husband was killed at Anzio and who later married again to the man named Jim Farnsworth, another vet from the Pacific. But that marriage didn't last long either. He was unfaithful to her. He forged checks or was involved in a stock swindle. The details are unclear. But Farnsworth vanished long before she was born, and the only husband she ever knew was Mike Meggert, the traveling salesman who never talked about the war either. And finally there's Gloria and Frank Krishniak, the couple with the 6 children. But Frank's war was different from the others' war. He faked a disability and never had to serve, which means that he has nothing to say either. And when she thinks of that generation of silent men, the boys who lived through the Depression and grew up to become soldiers or not soldiers in the war, she doesn't blame them for refusing to talk, for not wanting to go back into the past. But how curious it is, she thinks, how sublimely incoherent that her generation, which doesn't have much of anything to talk about yet, has produced men who never stop talking. Men like Bing, for example, or men like Jake, who talks about himself at the slightest prompting, who has an opinion on every subject, who spews forth words from morning to night. But just because he talks, that doesn't mean she wants to listen to him. Whereas with the silent men, the old men, the ones who are nearly gone now, she would give anything to hear what they have to say.